All right, man. This is episode number 65 of the Cozy Corner of Cinema. This is being recorded on Saturday, June 24th, 2023 at 12:06 p.m. Hope you all have been having a very good and productive week. We got a nice kind of rain shower going on outside here. It's really beautiful weather, actually. It's very cloudy outside. It's the perfect kind of weather to stay inside, get cozy up with a book or a film, and just kind of relax, man. If that is what you intend to do so. It's just really, really terrific out there. The cats are inside. They're cozying up on the beds, man, sleeping. You can hear them purring, probably having some wild dreams. It's just completely euphoric, completely just a sight to marvel at, man. It's just terrific. I was driving yesterday. I had to go pick up some food, and it was a nice sunny day. I had Tuesdays Gone by Leonard Skinner on. I was coming up over this overpass, taking a turn, and just the roads and the trees being painted by the sunlight, man, while I got the window down. It's a nice warm breeze, very cool kind of wind with the music going up, man. It was truly a sight to marvel at that you can't put into words. When you're in it and you experience it, it kind of transcends any kind of vocabulary you can try to put on it. But it's just what a beautiful sight it is, man. Wow. It's beautiful, man. All right. Plenty to get done in this next coming week or so. Next week's going to be very full. We got to do a Blu-ray episode for July. Got to do another Cozy Corner, and got to do the top 10 of 1934, which should be coming probably early next week. I don't know if it'll arrive exactly on Saturday the 1st, but it'll show up with at least in the first half of the week. I try to get those episodes out as soon as I can. Try not to delay them for too long so I can get started on the next list. But, it takes time to prepare, get notes together, refresh yourself on films. There's been a couple times you just watch these films and months have passed you go back to, and you just gotta kind of either rewatch it or sort of just get a real kind of review on it, remember the points you wanted to bring up. Because, you watch so many films and you intake so much media that it can be tricky to remember specific exact details. You go back to it later and you're like, oh, of course, how could I forget that? It's just really something to be on for. But anyways, I was at the cinema yesterday, and they showed a trailer for a new documentary, which I can't wait for, man. It's a new documentary about the making of Midnight Cowboy. And I mentioned before, let me get the name up here. Yeah, Desperate Souls, Dark City, and the Legend of Midnight Cowboy. I mentioned before the book that I had read a little while ago about the making of Midnight Cowboy. Let me just get the name of it here. It's in the other room, but I'll see if I can pull it up here. Here we go. Yeah, it's called Shooting Midnight Cowboy. The full title is Art, Sex, Loneliness, Liberation, and the Making of a Dark Classic, written by Glenn Frankel from 2022, which was a good book. It's a very solid book. What's interesting about the book and what looks to be the documentary as well is that while it is about the film itself, it's more about the climate of the time, in terms of a post-Vietnam era. I was talking last week when I was talking about Variety about New York in the mid-'80s, and I actually also wanted to correct myself. I don't know if I intentionally said it, but I didn't mean to, that the Variety Theater was not in Times Square. It was actually I believe it was near Times Square, but I think I may have said it was there, but it is not. So I just wanted to clarify that. But it's interesting to see New York at that point, looking at it in Midnight Cowboy, kind of a lot of the danger that was around, a lot of the grunginess, a lot of vets coming home and just really not knowing what to do with their lives, man. There was a documentary that I actually wanted to watch. I think it was about 20 minutes or so, and it was about a lot of the Vietnam vets who were coming home and, were either suffering from severe PTSD or were addicted to drugs and kind of wandering the streets. And I wanted to write down the name of that. But anyways, that looks like a very interesting documentary. It's going to have to be watched. But yeah, that Midnight Cowboy documentary looks fantastic. I definitely can't wait for that. It looks like they got interviews with Bob Balaban and John Voight. So definitely will be on that, like White on Rice when that's available. And I've talked about John Schlesinger on the show a couple of times, some of his films. He did a really terrific film from '76, also with Dustin Hoffman, Marathon Man. And in the book they talk about his film Darling, which I really want to watch. There was another film that he did I wanted to... maybe it was just Darling. Alright, maybe I'm thinking of something else. But yeah, Darling's one that I'm going to have to definitely get on at some point, man. That's been on my watch list since I read that book. And yeah, man, they talk about him being an English filmmaker, someone from London coming to America to make this kind of film, man, to really kind of show what kind of the not just New York, but what America was turning into, this sort of divide amongst, the youth and the political divide and the state of New York, not the, like, literal state, I mean, like, where it was at, and sort of the dirtiness, the grunginess, people kind of wandering around almost like zombies in a way. I love what Paul Schrader said about Taxi Driver when he described Travis Bickle as, like, him and his taxi cab are like a casket on wheels, just floating through the streets, and it's just such a haunting image and such haunting vocabulary to think of, but it's always kind of really stuck with me. But that'll definitely be watched when that is available, hopefully sooner than later. But Midnight Cowboy was one that, after I read that book, I had every intention to go back and rewatch, and then I just never did. I have that on Criterion in the other room. But that's, I've said before, I think that's just a brilliant film. I think that's just one of the really important seminal films from the transition to, from the old Hollywood to the new Hollywood, along lines of films like Bob and Carol, Ted and Alice, and Joe. Just a lot of these really, brilliant, sort of aware films. I say brilliant, maybe not so from the film itself. Like Bob and Carol, Ted and Alice is a film I like a lot, but I wouldn't call it brilliant in the way that I would call, like, Midnight Cowboy, or, like even Joe, I think, is a brilliant film. I think what that is saying, and also from a historical kind of standpoint, sort of the new nihilism and narcissism, maybe not narcissism so much, but the nihilism and sort of the bleakness going into the 70s and the transitional period that I was going through. That book I mentioned before, I wanted to say, I think it's called Revolution, which is a really brilliant book, that if you are at all a fan of, let me just pull up the name here, if you are at all a fan of, I think it goes up to the 70s, I think, what the hell is it? Not Pictures at a Revolution, that's a different book, also ironically about Hollywood, but this book, Revolution, that, of course, now I'm trying to find it, and it's not going to work. Yeah. But anyway, it's about primarily just the 60s and the world cinema that was coming out of it. They talk about, like the French New Wave and the Italian neorealism and a lot of the Hollywood films that are being made into, and I think it ends at around the 70s, talking about what the filmmakers would go on to do afterwards, some who would go on to make interesting later work, and others who either had early deaths or just didn't ever really make that many memorable films afterwards. And they talk about, like, and actually I don't remember if they talk about Antonioni, of course, but more so in terms of from his 60s films to specifically Zabriskie Point from 1970, which is a very politically charged film. I would say probably his most politically charged film, with his criticisms of America at that point, which I just watched Zabriskie Point probably about a couple months ago or so. It was great because I had watched The Other Side of the Wind, which Orson Welles was making was directly lifting from some of the sequences in Zabriskie Point. If you've seen both these films, you have the characters wandering through the desert, these sort of lost, young adults. But anyway, so TCM had it on, so I went ahead and watched that. And it's a very interesting film. I don't know, it didn't quite resonate well with me. I don't think it's quite as nuanced as Antonioni's other work. I think Antonioni, the more work of his that I've seen, the more I really have found myself just completely enraptured with him as a filmmaker. I think he is a brilliant filmmaker, and everything I've seen of his, I either have loved or liked. And I think Zabriskie Point is my least favorite of his work. I haven't seen The Passenger yet from '75 with Jack Nicholson, but I think when he was his earlier work, I just find a lot more subtle and nuanced. His work of like Blow Up and La Ventura and La Notte and Les Clis, especially like Red Desert, I think is brilliant. That it's funny that Zabriskie Point is his follow-up to Blow Up, which Blow Up I think is a brilliant film, and Zabriskie Point is a interesting film. But I don't know if it's just a different climate. It's a different it's a different kind of film for Antonioni. It's much more, at times feels almost, I don't even want to say cinema verite because it's really not that, but it feels a little bit more improvised. There's the sequence at the beginning of the film when you have all the college kids kind of debating and arguing, and that feels, I wonder how much of that is scripted and how much of that is intentional, before you get to later in the film when it's, these two characters kind of off on their own, wandering around. And it is worth watching, though. I think at least once. It may be a film that I would have to come back to, but I just don't think it's quite up to par with his other work, which is obviously, unfair to say for a filmmaker. What's the Woody Allen film when they're talking everything he does? They're talking about, well, it's not as good as your early work. I think it was, oh my gosh, what the hell was that film? There's so many Woody Allen films that it's hard to remember which one. Oh my gosh, it's gonna bother me now what that film was. I'm gonna have to look this up actually. Somebody probably already knows the film that. Gosh, actually, it was Gosh, you know what? I'm not even gonna try to find it now because is it Stardust Memories? I think that might be it. Is that when he was at the festival? Let's see here. Yeah, that's what it is. While attending a retrospect of his work, a filmmaker recalls his life and his loves, the inspirations for his films. That's what it was. Oh God, I just hit my knee. Yeah, Stardust Memories. It's a very good film from 1980. Anyways. That is a whole other tangent right there. Moving on from there. Alright. Moving on from there. Let's see. I want to talk about this film. Yeah, let's talk about this. A film that I mentioned last week. A film that has stuck with me in the time that I have... in the time that's passed since I've seen it. I've seen this film twice now. And it's a film that has I've said before, there are great films that you watch that maybe don't stick with you. I'm thinking of like films I've seen this year, and I'm like, okay, these are great films, but I don't know how long lasting they are. And it's impossible to say exactly how a film will emotionally resonate with you with time past. I don't think it's good to immediately evaluate a film or any kind of art because with time past there are you are not the same person you are years ago or months ago or anything like that. And that's not to say that you don't have the same beliefs or the same ideologies or the same kind of opinions. It's more so that when you have time past and you have experiences past that can mirror the art that you take in or may not emotionally resonate with you. I look at one of my very favorite films ever. Easily, I don't have like a top list or anything like that. I funny enough, actually, I tried to make a 100 favorite films list and I kept taking films off and putting films on. I can't, when somebody asks me, what's your favorite film? I don't have a favorite film. I love different films for different reasons and different films and different art forms resonate with me emotionally. I'm just making up words now. But a film like Gus Van Sant's My Own Private Idaho with Keanu Reeves and River Phoenix, which the first time that I saw that film, I didn't get it at all. And when I say I didn't get it, I don't mean I didn't understand it. That's a shallow kind of reasoning. There are films I don't understand from a shallow point of view that I have great feelings on, positively. But it's a film that I'd watched, and I just thought I don't know what you're trying to do with this. And then I watched. It was a film that stuck with me, and I knew I didn't like it, but I was thinking, why is this still sticking with me? Why am I still replaying scenes? Why are there better films that I have seen after this that I remember less about? And ultimately, when I went back with at least years past. I mean, or maybe not years. Maybe it was like a year, like months, and it was a good amount of time for it to be a significant amount of time. But I eventually went back and I watched it, and it was like watching it for the first time with a completely different perspective, where I'm watching that film and I'm watching the way that scenes are played out and certain musical cues are played. Not when I say musical cues, not like songs, like record, like needle drops. I'm talking about like certain moments, the way they correlate with the score and certain directorial choices that at first I was like, I don't understand what you're trying to do with this. That on a second viewing, I'm able to understand more and get more emotionally attached to. And that's why I think that film is, that's a whole other conversation. The film I was talking about here, which I think has been slowly creeping up to being a favorite film of mine, but I would need to watch it for a third time, is from a filmmaker I admire a lot, and I think a lot of people like a lot, Jim Jarmusch. His 2016 film Paterson, with Adam Driver and Golshifteh Farahani. Good God, I can't say names. You may be thinking to yourself, Dan, you can't pronounce any names. You're always getting people's names wrong, and you're absolutely right. I get films wrong. I was calling the Banshees of Inisherin the Banshees of Inisherin. My bad. Anyways, this is a beautiful film. This is a very meditative film about the week in the life of this guy named Paterson, who lives in Paterson, New Jersey, played by Adam Driver. And he lives with his girlfriend, and he, is a bus driver. He lives a very cozy life. He lives a very relaxed, almost meditative, kind of Buddhist in a way sort of lifestyle. Nothing seems to get him upset. He writes his poetry. He loves his girlfriend, and you're watching this film, and it's just a week in his life, and it's light on plot, it's light on conflict, but it's more about this character going through life, and he has achieved this sort of nirvana where he enjoys listening to the people on his bus. He enjoys, his rituals of going to the pub and having a pint and talking to the bartender and the owner, and they have conversations about, he's talking about this, like, he's trying to beat himself at chess, and there's no TV at the pub, and he's talking to, like, his coworker who has a very kind of, my wife's doing this and that, how are you? I'm all right, and you're watching the film, and as a viewer, your guard is up more than his is, because you're noticing things that the character either doesn't notice or is not bothered by. He has a girlfriend who he loves very much, and she loves him, but, maybe she does a couple things as a viewer you're like, I don't know about, and, Paterson maybe doesn't know about, but you're okay with, like there's one point where she talks about getting a guitar because she wants to, even though money, they try to be okay with their money, but she's like, I want to buy this guitar, and that you can see that maybe he's like, I don't know if that's the best idea, but because he loves her so much, and he's willing to be like, you know what, because this is important to you, I want you to have this, and then there's a point in the film where the closest thing to a conflict, and she's like, can I make you feel better? Can I play you a song on the guitar? And he almost immediately is like, no, like, he knows that, like, this isn't something that really interests him, and in this moment in time when he needs to be kind of by himself and isolated, he doesn't want to indulge in that, and he doesn't want to be mean or rude. And so as an audience member, you're watching this, and there's one moment in the film that's just so sweet where they go to see a film. Actually, I'll let you see what film. I'll let you find out what film they're seeing. It's a interesting film that Jarmusch decided for them to see, which is a very good film as well. And he just looks over, and he's not watching the film. He just looks at her, and he doesn't say anything. It's just a look, and you just see how content he is. It's sort of like he has achieved that kind of nirvana in his life that I think a lot of us try to strive for. I love the way that Adam Driver plays the role. It's a very subtle, subdued, relaxed role. And when I say it's relaxed and subdued, that is not in replacement of, oh, well, he's not saying much, so he's not doing a lot of acting, which I think is very easy for, some films that you see, where you have an actor, and it's like, well, they don't have a lot of dialogue, so they're not really needing to do a whole lot. And it's just like, I don't agree with that. There are films where I think when a character says how they're feeling or says a certain expository line, oftentimes it can get in the way of the film itself. When you watch a film and characters are just telling you what they're feeling instead of showing it to you, it definitely depends on the context of the film, but oftentimes that can be a detriment. How often in our lives are we saying exactly what we're feeling? Probably not as often as a character in a film, because we don't need to express to somebody else like a character would in a film, like, hey, hey audience, I am feeling this right now, I am feeling sad. And how many times do you watch a film where a character has all this exposition that you would never say to a person? You watch a film and it's like, you and I have had a past. There was a time we did this, and there was a time we did that, and now I am fed up with our relationship. And I remember I was watching a film, and I was like, there was one sequence early on where it was an ex-wife of a character, and I was like, good God, man, they are just explaining their entire... They're like, you left us when you did this, and then I grew up with this, and our daughter... And I'm like, good God, man, this character would never say that in this situation. That is just such poor writing. Good God, man. I remember even when I watched that film at the time, I was like, what is going on here, man? But with Paterson, there are other moments, like, when you're, there's the way that Jarmusch decides to show certain things. Like, we see it, like, the dog, who also has an IMDb page, funny enough, but the dog being left on its own, like, while Paterson's at the pub, we wonder, was something going to happen to this dog? Why are they choosing to show this, And you got to watch the film and see if that is a red flag or if that is intentional. Like, you as an audience member notice that, but Paterson maybe doesn't. Not so much out of negligence, but because maybe he's confident enough that nothing will happen to this dog or anything like that, I think what I like about Jarmusch as a filmmaker so much is that even if I don't like all of his films, to me, he as a filmmaker is far, far more interesting than somebody who takes no risks and no chances. I watched a film recently. I'm not gonna go on a tirade here, but I watched a film recently from a filmmaker, which is a filmmaker people like, and that's fine. And I like his early work, but I watched a new film of his, and I'm going, there is no heart, there is no life. This is a soulless reliance on exactly what you expect. I was watching this film and I was like, there is no risk taking, there is no chances. This is like comfort for the audience, and if the audience likes it, that's fine. But it's sort of like I'm watching this film and I'm like, this is to me in no way different than a Marvel film, because you know exactly what you're going to get. There are no risks being taken, and it's very, you're not getting anything out of it intellectually. And when I say that, I say a Marvel film, but I'm not taking a dig at Marvel films. Obviously, I understand the appeal, and I think that's great that people come together and like those. I'm saying that from my point of view, that, it's almost like on autopilot, like anybody could make this film. And that's why when I look at, like, that film that I saw, it's just like, there's no heart, there's no soul. This is completely just a safety net. So I watched Jarmusch, and I get the complete opposite. His earlier work, which I haven't seen all of his films. There's a handful of his work that I haven't seen. Let me see here. I've seen, in order, I've seen Stranger Than Paradise, Down by Law, Dead Man, Only Lovers Left Alive, Paterson, and The Dead Don't Die. So I know I've heard Permanent Vacation and Coffee and Cigarettes, both very good. Actually, I have a Blu-ray of Broken Flowers. Oh, I've also seen Ghost Dog. I forgot about that film. I have a Blu-ray of Broken Flowers that I have not seen yet, but I hear is pretty good. But with his films, some of his films I don't like more than others. I would say that, and I don't want to take a dig at this, I don't want to be a jerk, but like, To me, I think The Dead Don't Die is his weakest film. I think the writing in that film is just very poor. He's trying to do too much, but it doesn't work. But to me, I watch that film and I go, okay, well, this feels different than Paterson. This feels different than Only Lovers Left Alive. This feels different than Stranger Than Paradise. He's trying to do something different. And, okay, it doesn't work for me, but I'm okay with that because if it does land for me, or it does land, maybe you watch The Dead Don't Die and you're like, I thought that was one of his best films, and that's completely your prerogative. Then you can look at that and his other work and go, okay, he's taking chances, he's taking risks. When I see filmmakers who don't take risks or chances, not that you have to, but when I see films that are almost like on autopilot, it's sort of like what are you doing, man? That's why, just certain that's why I love like what Scorsese does, man, because he'll do films you might expect of him that are also brilliant, but then he'll do films like Kundun or The Age of Innocence or Silence, or even when he goes back to his kind of, not even necessarily back, when he does something that you expect more traditional, like The Irishman. It's like, you think you're going to be watching one thing, and then it's almost a meditative, sort of self-reflective life, or a self-reflective analysis of the life of these people and how this lifestyle is a very isolated one. It's not Goodfellas, it's not Casino. It doesn't revel in the carnage. Not that those films do either, but you get what I'm saying is that it's, the violence in that in The Irishman is quick, it's brief, it's harsh, It's not harsh, I'm sorry. It's very like matter of fact, But that's why I love Jarmusch. I think he's such an interesting guy. And also, he's such an interesting guy as well. He's that's whole the conversation right there. But with Paterson, it's just one of these films that's really stuck with me that I've just thought about endlessly, and I've seen Adam Driver in other films, and I just am always brought back to his performance here. And I think Adam Driver, he's just become one of my favorite actors working right now. I think anytime he appears in a film, it's definitely, it's like, oh, that's terrific. He saw something in the script that made him want to be on board. It's just, I think this is a film that I don't think has been talked about enough in terms of Jarmusch's work. Because his recent work, I think Only Lovers Left Alive got a lot of talk. Remember, there was a lot of talk when that came out, and I like that film quite a bit, actually. That's a very interesting vampire film that's more about the characters than it is about any kind of horrific kind of aspect to it, I should say. With, very good performances by Tom Hiddleston, Tilda Swinton, how do you say her name? Wasikowska, and Anton Yelchin, R.I.P. And that film feels different than Paterson, which feels different than The Dead Don't Die. It's just great stuff. So, yeah, if you're... also, there's a connection. I was talking about LA Without a Map last week, and there's a Jarmusch film featured in that, which I will not spoil, and I wouldn't recommend looking up. It's a nice surprise if you watch the film. But either way, this was a Amazon film, I believe, so you should be able to watch this on Prime. This, I think, has a Blu-ray as well. But anyways, this is completely worth your time, and I think this is one of the most beautiful films of recent memory. And I say recent memory of like maybe the past decade or so, which I think is a good starting point. I say recent memory, and then I always forget. I'm like, oh man, like 2018 was like 5 years ago. Good God, man. I always talk about, being aware of time and using it wisely. So you definitely don't want to be wasting it on situations or scenarios or people that you don't want to be associated with. It's sort of like you really got to use your time the way that you find benefits going to be the most beneficial to you. If that means staying inside and working on your art, or going out and seeing acquaintances or lovers or friends or whatever it is, then that is completely something that you need to be at the forefront of. If you're finding yourself, why am I here? Why am I doing this? Why am I associating with these people? If you find yourself in that situation, then I think it's time to take a step back and kind of reflect on where you're at. But anyways, guys, this episode is just about wrapping up. So it's still raining out, a bit of sun outside, a little less cloudy. The cat is now cleaning himself because I'm sure I probably woke him up. But anyways, guys, use your time wisely. Make sure you are doing good. Make sure you're eating good. All that good stuff. I'll be back next week with a couple episodes. Like I said, the July Blu-ray episode will be coming. Another Cozy Corner, and then the top 10 of 1934 will be out. So you guys take care. All the best. That's all I got.